Good morning. This May 8th, 2025 meeting of Senate Finance Committee will come to order. We have House File 2442, Senator Frentz, the Omnibus Energy, Utilities, Environment, Climate Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Very proud to bring before you House File 2442, the subject of the Energy Omnibus. First, Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Severson has an oral amendment to the A31 amendment.
Yes, and before she does it, I will explain that the House File 2442 passed the House, and so we're taking up 2442, and the A31 delete everything amendment was amended earlier, and so she's going to explain the amendments to things we will incorporate in the A31 amendment to make it the real amendment. Go ahead, Ms. Severson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The oral amendment will make a technical change to the A31 amendment to make sure that that amendment amends the House file. So that amendment is as follows. Senator Frentz moves to amend the A31 amendment to Senate File 2393 as follows. Page 1, line 1, strike Senate File number 2393 and insert House File 2442.
That's the only change. And Senator Frentz, can you incorporate that in your amendment?
Yes, and again, Mr. Chair, essentially what this does is take the A31 amendment, which was drafted to the Senate file, and amends it to be to the House file. And I would ask for member support on the oral amendment to the A31.
Yes, okay. I was just going to incorporate her little change. So we've got the amendment before us. Did you want to go through the amendment, or?
I do. Do you want to adopt the oral amendment and the amendment first, Mr. Chair? Whatever you prefer.
I was just incorporating it so we wouldn't have that one. In others, we have.
Okay.
He's asking adopt the whole amendment. Okay, I'm open to that if there's no objection to that. Senator Frentz moves the A31 amendment with that change incorporated into it. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Opposed? I'm sorry. You can say aye or nay. Okay. Senators, I believe I'm going to rule that the motion prevailed. So the A31, as with the change incorporated, has been adopted. And I will note that we do have a quorum here and that a number of our members are online, so we will do roll calls generally so they can all be voting. With that, Senator Frentz, A31 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Just some brief comments before Mr. Mueller walks through the spreadsheet. Of course, I'd like to start by thanking our staff, Cassie Tomerdahl, Tyler Klein, Travis Ernest, our nonpartisan excellent staff, Olivia Severson and Dan Mueller, the ranking member, Senator Andrew Matthews, all the members of the committee in bringing us to this point. Members, this bill comes to you as a compromise from the bill that emerged from the Senate Utilities, Environment and Climate Committee with a 9-2 bipartisan vote. I've made commitments to members of both parties that the bill with the A31 amendment will be represented by me on the floor and that I will not myself vote for any amendments. Having said that, it does make some important steps forward. We have two basic goals, members. One, we want to fund the operations of the Department of Commerce, the Public Utilities Commission, with the requested operating increase. And two, and members of the Finance Committee, this is a Finance Committee, and you'll hear finance in a minute. We want to lower the cost of Minnesotans' electric bills while we pursue our clean energy goals, and this bill achieves those. With that, Mr. Chair, I was hoping Mr. Mueller could do a walkthrough of the spreadsheet.
Mr. Mueller, welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'll be walking through the spreadsheet. When the spreadsheet was posted, it was still posted to Senate File 2393, but now it is to the and it's. You'll see the columns on the right-hand side of the spreadsheet. It says Senate budget, and above it says Senate File 2393. In parentheses, A31 DE. So that means it is to this amendment that was just drafted. This bill originally had a target of minus $4 million to the general fund in both fiscal year 26-27 and also the tails. The bill that emerged from the committee contained a repeal of the renewable development account, and the effects of that had some additional costs to the general fund that went above the target. So the DE amendment now does not contain that repeal of the renewable development account. So I will go through the spreadsheet and point out the change items that are now in this DE amendment. The parts of the agency, only part of the Department of Commerce is funded in this bill, just the two divisions, the Energy Resources Division and then the Petroleum Tank Release Board. The first part of the spreadsheet shows all the lines on lines 7 through 17 are all base appropriations at the department. I will note on line 15, the pre-weatherization and workforce training, that is now under a transfer, so I'll go through that later, and that is the one general fund change item that is in the bill that gets the bill to the target. The other change item on line 40, in Article 4 of the bill, there is a new provision dealing with extraordinary events bonds. This provision allows the natural gas utilities to issue bonds if they have a catastrophic event. The Department of Commerce and the PUC will have some costs for that only if it happens. The way that the language is structured, and we're showing cost here on line 40 that would happen to the special revenue fund, but that's only if it actually has happened. But we're showing a cost, but if there's no catastrophic event, the cost won't actually happen. And those go to the special revenue fund, and they have the assessment authority to recover those costs if they have an expenditure. The next change item is on line 52, and this is an operating adjustment from the Petroleum Tank Release Fund, and it's an increase of $500,000 per year to the Department of Commerce. So their base appropriation was just over $1 million per year, and it goes up to 1.597. And this covers increased inflationary cost and cost of a new database at the department. And that was in the governor's budget. That is all the change items for the Department of Commerce. I'll note on line 77 shows the total cost for this division. There's a number of costs that happen that are not in the bill. They're mostly federal funds. The federal funds are on line 68, and those include mostly LIHEAP costs. But the total cost to the department is almost $706 million for the biennium, and just over $599 in the tails, and that's mostly federal funds. The next page is the Public Utilities Commission. There are a number of change items that are for the Public Utilities Commission. All these items are funded through the general fund, but the PUC has the assessment authority to recover these costs back into the general fund, so that they're all revenue neutral to the general fund. The change items start on line 92. There's an operating adjustment for $714,000, and then $956,000 in the tails. Line 93 is a technology and maintenance line item, and this is for $1.6 million in 26-27, and also in the tails. There's a tribal liaison, that's one FTE for $340,000, and also in the tails. Then there's some new additional FTEs, 3 FTEs for natural gas utility planning and coordination. That's $1.1 million, and also in the tails. And then on line 96 is the PUC costs for that program in Article 4 dealing with the extraordinary advance bonds. And again, that cost will only happen in the PUC if they actually have to issue those bonds. The total increase for the PUC, line 99, is $4.22 million in 26-27, and then $4.47 million in the tails. And again, all those costs that go through the PUC are assessed back And so they're, on the net side, they're net neutral. The other agency that is in this budget area, but they do not receive any direct appropriations in the bill, is the Climate Innovation Finance Authority. This was established back in 2023, and the operating costs for that agency is on line 104. They use their operating costs through the existing money that was transferred to them 2 years ago. There's about $105 million that was transferred to the Climate Innovation Finance Authority back in the last biennium, and they also received some federal money. But since this agency is under this jurisdiction, I'm also showing them in the spreadsheet their operating costs. But again, they're not directly appropriated in the bill. And that's at, their operating cost is $2 million per year. The other change item in the bill on line 110 deals with the pre-weatherization program. And this is now being tracked as a transfer instead of a direct appropriation. And the base amount for this program is $3.2 million, but now it lowers that transfer down to $1.119 million. So a savings of $4 million per biennium net to the general fund. And that gets the bill to the target that was assigned for this bill. The last part of page 2, it just shows the revenues that are collected in this bill. Again, those all go to Commerce and PUC through assessments. Then the last, page 3 just shows how this bill gets to the target. I'll start on line 133 is net general fund. The PUC has $3.8 million of general fund spending. On line 149, they collect that back through assessments. And then the transfer reduction is on line 141, shows a negative $4 million, and that is our target for the bill. The other thing that is in the budget article is that there's a extension to a previous appropriation that is shown on line 159 through 160 is for the previous appropriation for the tribal liaison, and there's an extension of that appropriation which would extend about $226,000 past the biennium. The last part of the budget bill is Article 2, which deals with the appropriations from the Renewable Development Account. I will note that the February forecast showed about a $13 million reduction to the Renewable Development Account that MMB made a correction to the interest earned over time and made a one-time correction in fiscal year 25. You'll see on line 3 of the page 4 of the spreadsheet, there's a negative number under fiscal year 25. So that reflects a one-time adjustment to the RDA to adjust for the interest earned over time, and that resulted in about a $13 million less money being in the renewable development account that would be available for fiscal year 26. The new expenditures in this bill there's $20 million of new expenditures from the RDA in this bill, and I'll note those. They are spread over a couple of departments. First, we have in the Department of Commerce to the university on line 16. There's a couple things that are happening with the University of St. Thomas Microgrid. First, in fiscal year 25, there's an extension of a previous appropriation, and that extends about a little over $3 million from a fiscal year 25 appropriation. And then in fiscal year 26, the University of St. Thomas Microgrid program had a $4 million base, and this is adding a $400,000 base appropriation, and this is adding $800,000 to that. The next, there are 4 other projects going through the Department of Commerce. On line 19, the green hydrogen project at St. Cloud, the anaerobic digester on line 20 for $4 million, $2.2 million for Kalamazoo geothermal energy system, and line 22, $1 million for the Minnesota Clean Energy Program. So that is $10 million to the Department of Commerce in new grants through the RDA. The next new item is on line 50, a $5 million grant to the University of Minnesota for green ammonia power research. And then on line 54, a $3 million grant going through the PCA for emerald ash borer biomass. And then the last item is on line 95. There's a one-time transfer of $2 million to the geothermal planning account. This will add $2 million to a program that was started in 2024 that originally had $1.2 million, and this provides grants to cities to do geothermal planning. So that's the $20 million of new expenditures out of the RDA were for those programs. And that is it for the spreadsheet. We'll point out a couple items in the, just a couple of fiscal things in the DE amendment that the committee might be interested in. The first is on, in the DE amendment, there is a cap on grant administration costs. On page 7 of the amendment, lines 12 through 17 has a $100,000 cap on grant administration. This deals with the RDA appropriations through Commerce, and this notwithstands the 16B98 subdivision 14. So this puts a set dollar amount for that. And also the grant through the Pollution Control Agency on page 8 of the amendment sets that administrative cost at $25,000. And that also notwithstands 16B98 sub 14. And those are the items that I have with the spreadsheet and in the amendment. And
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. And does this bill comply with the budget rules now?
Mr. Chair, I believe it does, yes.
Thank you for making sure that happens. We appreciate that. Senator Frentz, on the bill as amended.
Sure. Thank you again, members. Thank you, Mr. Mueller, for the run-through. As you see, we had a cut target, $4 million. That comes out of pre-weatherization funding. We do like weatherization. It does help, especially low-income Minnesotans with their energy bills. But given the target, I think this is the appropriate way to handle it. There's policy in the bill as well, Mr. Chair, and happy to discuss that with members. Happy to answer questions. Again, trying to lower people's energy bills and achieve our clean energy goals. And Mr. Mueller mentioned the administrative grant issue. Mr. Chair, this committee's been through that on many occasions, and I don't propose that I talk about it any longer. I did receive a call from the Commerce Commissioner yesterday who wanted to continue that discussion, and I said everything in every bill is a continuing discussion.
Thank you. Questions or discussion from the committee? I have one question. The federal IHEAP funding, you have a provision in here. If we lose that, could you explain what?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dibble, who's done quite a bit of work with low-income heating assistance, has helped put a provision in this bill which says basically if the federal government ceases the low-income heating assistance, Minnesota will still be able to continue that. It essentially says that the definition of low-income heating assistance eligible Minnesota is no longer whether the federal government has them defined that way, but uses the same criteria, and I'm supportive of that change. And
maybe this is for Mr. Mueller, but how much do we get from federal IHEAP, and how much are we putting into, on an ongoing basis, putting into our own energy assistance?
Mr. Chairman, you'll note on page 1 of the spreadsheet, on line 68, where it shows the federal funds that go through the Department of Commerce Energy Division. I put in parentheses there, a lot of that is for the weather. Most of that, almost all of that is the LIHEAP program. And this is just based on what the agency was going to receive back in the governor's budget, so I don't know if that's changed since then, and they could probably best answer that. But those numbers on line 68 are mostly LIHEAP money coming through the department.
Okay, and how much, do you know how much we as a state put into energy assistance weatherization stuff, heap stuff?
Mr. Chairman, the amount of the weatherization money, back on line 15, in fiscal year 24-25, there was a bunch of one-time money that went in on that. You'll see on the column, the 24-25 forecast, there's about $38.7 million that went for weatherization. And then what this bill did is reduce some of the ongoing money for that, but it was mostly a one-time thing that was appropriated back in 24-25.
So in effect, more than the lion's share would be gone if the federal money disappears. But the provision here would say what we do have can continue going out from our state stuff. Okay, Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Frentz, can you talk a little about termination of the solar panel program? I know that you had a chance to talk to my constituent today. Thought it would be important for you to, kind of talk through your thinking and why terminating that program in 2030 would make sense. I know that there are other members who also have received some correspondence about it, and so we thought it would be important for you to talk about so we can ask questions about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Champion, happy to. The Community Solar Garden Program was instituted last decade to introduce the solar marketplace to Minnesota and to help create a vibrant solar industry here in Minnesota. In that, it has been an unquestioned success. We now have a thriving solar market, we have developers that are delivering services, and we have Minnesotans that understand that not only is solar a low-cost energy, but it's actually very flexible. So Senator Champion, the sunsetting of the program in the bill reflects mostly my concern about the price. I use this example. If bread costs $4, and that's because that's the competitive price for it, and everybody pays $4, and I say to Senator Champion, you can have it for $2, and I'll split the other $2 with you, and the rest of the committee will pick up that extra $2. You'd probably say that's a good deal. I would say you just made it more expensive. Essentially, retail's 14 cents, and we're now seeing wholesale solar at about 5 cents. So we want clean, renewable energy. We simply want to do it without an involuntary obligation of Xcel Energy ratepayers. About 1.4 million Minnesotans are in the Xcel territory, and when the program was created, it essentially said the community solar gardens can obligate all the other ratepayers to pick up the above-market cost. At the time, the above-market cost represented 2015, 2016, 2017 costs. Those costs have come down, and the significance for ratepayers is now estimated at $7 per ratepayer per month, and many of these contracts are 20 or 25 years. Just as an example, members, the Public Utilities Commission requires Xcel to report the cost of community solar in the fuel clause. This is the clause where they get permission for nuclear, coal, wind, solar, market solar, and community solar. In 2023, Minnesota ratepayers in Xcel territory paid $262 million for the Community Solar Garden Program, about 30% of the fuel clause. That produced about 5% of the energy. And so I think it was said best by Derek Moe, who's the CEO of the Minnesota Rural Electric Association. We can buy twice as much carbon reduction at the same price. Utility-grade solar is now booming in this country for obvious reasons, growth of about 33% in the last 5 years. Minnesotans want clean, renewable energy, but the Community Solar Garden Program is no longer effective at delivering it to them in a cost-effective manner. And if you want an example, the state of California, often seen as the nation's leader in renewable energy, reversed its net metering policies and made changes estimated to alleviate an $8 billion burden on ratepayers. And if California is going that way, I think we better ask ourselves, why is it Minnesota? Minnesota's Community Solar Garden Program is alone in the nation in the way it handles things and the involuntary obligating. And speaking of voluntary, members, community solar gardens are available not just to Xcel, the state's largest utility, but to rural electric co-ops, municipal associations. Do you know how many have taken advantage of that opportunity in the 10 years? Zero, not one. And so for all those reasons, simply put, we can buy more clean energy for less, and we should do that. And the sunset of 5 years is an attempt to recognize that there's some federal dollars coming into the Department of Commerce in that time. Thanks, Senator Champion.
Senator Champion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think he answered it right at the end, because what I was going to ask what I was going to ask him was if the cost is so great and so greatly affecting other Xcel Energy, participants, then why are we waiting until 2030? I just wanted to ask that question because I don't know as much about this, but I just thought I would ask that question because I know that this is something that's come up.
Thank you, Senator Champion. And Mr. Chair, just to follow up on Senator Champion's question, I would be fine with an earlier sunset. I think we're talking about expenses that are locked in for 20 or 25 years. However, I made a commitment to other members of the Senate when we agreed to reduce the bill that came out of energy, and this is the agreement that we came up with.
And Mr. Chair, just so to be clear, I'm not suggesting that it should be done earlier because I don't want anyone saying, oh, Senator Champion suggested it should be cut earlier. That's not what I'm suggesting. I was just asking the question. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little confused, Senator Frentz, because I thought the legislature asked the Department of Commerce to do a benefit cost analysis, and the study came back showing that the program was cost effective for the state. So what's the response that there were net benefits?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Pappas. I read the study and was very disappointed. That study was written by proponents of community solar and did not even attempt to address the impact on other ratepayers. The Minnesota Attorney General submitted a letter on this topic a year and a half ago to the Public Utilities Commission and made it clear that the issue is the impact on the non-subscribing ratepayers. So that I appreciate the study. I was the one who requested that in the 2023 Omnibus. And I would politely say it's at odds with all the other information that we have. I'd also add, Senator Pappas and members, Senator Champion mentioned we talked to one of his constituents maybe 30 minutes ago who had called and asked. This was probably the 20th straight Minnesotan who approached us to ask about the program, who was unaware of any impact on the non-subscribing ratepayers at all. And by the end of the call, speaking of not putting words in Senator Champion's mouth, I would say that particular constituent actually raised the question, why aren't we sunsetting the program sooner? So the study just simply does not reflect the above market cost, and we're having the same discussion in net metering, although because of the agreement that I've made with the Senate, that net metering provision is not in this bill, but California took the same step. We're paying 14 cents per kilowatt hour. Its cost on the market is 5 cents. There's no reason to buy it that way, especially involuntarily.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Frentz, for bringing this bill forward. I know you've done an incredible job of working with members who've had a lot of issues with the bill and have taken out a number of things I've heard from my constituents that they had issues with, so I want to thank you for doing that. And I sort of want to go back to something that you said earlier when you were answering the question that Senator Champion asked around the solar, the community solar energy piece. If ratepayers for the retail rate, sorry, I wrote my questions down. So if we need to get rid of community solar because it charges ratepayers for the retail rate, does this mean that utility companies will sell their energy at the wholesale rate?
Mr. Chair, Senator Mohammed, excellent question. First of all, keep in mind there are 3 different tiers of utilities. We have investor-owned utilities like Xcel that are for-profit. They have shareholders, they report profit. They are a pass-through for the Community Solar Garden program. The other 2 investor-owned utilities, Otter Tail and Minnesota Power, do not operate community solar. For a co-op, for example, I'm a member of a rural electric co-op, there is no community solar, but there is net metering, and they are able to purchase their solar energy at market rates when it suits them at about 5 cents. And the point is that when they have a forced price at 14 cents, that is absorbed by all the members of that co-op. That's where the pressure comes. They want to simply buy it at the current rate. And these programs lock in that rate for 20 years. So that we are talking about exactly what you should be asking, which is what is best for the electric bill of your constituents, which will deliver clean, renewable energy at the lowest price. And I think we're at the point where, good news, solar power is now available for less than ever. It's competitive with wind, which it wasn't quite as competitive a few years ago. And the utilities for the co-ops and for the munis do not have community solar, so they're not affected. Does that start to answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I think the thing that I hear most from my constituents over the last, I think, for sure, 24 hours, my email has been overwhelming on this issue. It's that this is a program that we started, 3 years ago. We're sunsetting it to 2030. Most of these have not even fully been implemented. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Mr. Chair, Senator Mohammed, in 2023, the Senate position was to sunset community solar. To be clear, members, this was the Senate position to end this program 2 years ago. In conference committee, we reached an agreement to change the program. We're still paying the same amount above market. However, its distribution is to low-income Minnesotans up to about 600,000 total members. However, everyone is seeing that extra charge on their bill. I'll give you an example of the larger dynamic, Senator Mohammed. The city of Mankato is an early subscriber to community solar. Cities, schools, organizations can be subscribers. And in 2023, they received an $82,000 credit. So that's good for the city budget, right? City of Faribault. However, at $7 per month per resident, XL territory being Mankato, the city residents pay almost an extra $1 million above market than if they were simply able to buy solar off the marketplace. So that while the people that receive the credit, and for perspective, there's about 30,000 subscribers in an XL territory of about 1.4 million. So 1 out of 42, 1 out of 50, give or take. They get the benefit of the extra cost that goes to everyone else. And I think that would be why I would say it's time to sunset the program, and I thought that in 2023. The new program, we could do much more, Senator Mohammed, much more for low-income Minnesotans by buying solar at the wholesale rate and taking the extra money and giving it out in LIHEAP, pre-weatherization, or anything else.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Frentz. I think what you're saying in essence makes sense to me. I think the biggest issue that folks often have is when it comes to large utility companies, for example, like XL. I know they have many programs that help communities of color and communities with low-income backgrounds. I think the biggest issue is these other solar companies have a much deeper relationships with the community, right? There is, some guy in your neighborhood who has a small business who who's going to do it for you. And so I think that's sort of the part of the conversation that's missing, is that these folks are within the community, and often these large companies don't have as much relationship as other folks. I think sunsetting the program, I think especially because you have mentioned it's working so well, whether it's expensive or not, I think it's a debatable question depending on who it's coming from. I think it's something that we should continue to revisit and talk about before the bill hits the floor. I'm hearing a lot from my constituents. I know we haven't had a chance to talk before this, but would love to continue that conversation with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could briefly, Senator Mohammed, count me in. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, Senator Champion had me talk to one of his constituents who had concerns that sound very similar to the ones you're hearing, and I would be more than happy to meet with any of your constituents. Just a reminder, by the end of that call, it's my take that Senator Champion's constituent understood much better the above market cost and its impact on his neighbors. Jim was his name, and he actually said, why would we not consider sunsetting it sooner? Happy to have those conversations with you and your client before the bill hits the floor.
Further discussion on that or any point in the bill? Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, Senator Frentz, from my understanding, there was when the original bill left when Senate filed 2393, put my glasses on so I can read it, left the Energy Committee, it had bipartisan strong support, but now when it came here, there's a huge amendment that changed it drastically. Why, when you had a bill that had such strong support, why would we amend it here at the Finance Committee before the floor after it had such good support coming out of the Energy Committee?
Senator Frentz.
Mr. Chair, Senator Howe, I think that's the question I'd like the Senate to consider. I would have preferred to bring the entire bill from the Senate Energy Committee forward to this committee and ask for support. I would just say the option was presented to me about whether to separate policy and budgets. I looked at it, I talked to Senator Matthews about that choice, and I made a decision to take some of the policy out in exchange for keeping them together, which I think will ultimately prove to save more money for Minnesota ratepayers. I have the list here, Senator Howe, of the things that came out, and that includes biomass, Senator Matthews' data center language, which is traveling separately, I'm glad to report, the Farnsworth Amendment, large hydro language, B100, which was supported by all of our farmers. And I thought all of those were good provisions and voted for all of those in committee. But we make choices here sometimes. I want this bill to get to the floor. I also want to pass the budget part. And so for those reasons, I chose this path and I'm standing by it. And that includes my commitment to not support any amendments on the floor, although I don't speak for the other 66 senators. That I think is more likely to benefit Minnesotans in the end.
Mr. Chair. Well, thanks for that explanation. The other question I have is, I've got a person that put in a large solar system, an $80,000 system, has not been able to get hooked to the system yet because of complications with Excel and other reasons. This 5-year sunset, does that mean if he does finally get on the system in 5 years, he'll be done trying to recoup it from net metering? I just want to get a scope of, is that 5-year sunset to applications, or is that sunset the net metering deal is done?
Senator Frentz.
Chair Marty, Senator Howe, glad to report the bill in front of you only deals with the Community Solar Garden Program and does not contain the Senator Rarick net metering provisions, which I believe are the subject of that particular issue. So this would not have any effect if that, under current law, were to go forward. That landowner would be protected. I want to make clear, and if Senator Rarick were here, he would too. We have real questions about some of the same fiscal dynamics in net metering in Minnesota, so that I would tell your constituent that subject should continue to be a topic of conversation. The bill in front of you doesn't propose to change that.
Further discussion on the bill. And Senator Frentz, for your comments, I want to thank you for working with folks and trying to come up with compromise. As I told you, I think policy stuff, especially stuff that's controversial, should be separate bills from finance things. I appreciate your work on that. And I want to say that I think the community solar is one who's been involved in that since the beginning. I think it not only was it to help disperse the growth of clean energy and more than outside of utility hands, but also I think it was an important way to quickly ramp up the amount of solar we're getting in the state. And I think that back 12 years ago or so, I think the solar mandate in that bill at that time was, I think, 1.5% by 2020, which was, in order to do that, I think a 3,500% increase in terms of how much solar we've had from the 1970s till 2013. And community solar has been a big part of that, and we well exceeded that 1.5%, as you know, and it's moving forward. So I understand, I'm not surprised that this is something that will phase out. I don't know if this is the right timing, the right with everything else, but you worked out an agreement with people, and appreciate that. Further discussion of the bill before Senator Frentz comments? If not, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Again, for the Finance Committee, I ask for your support for the fiscal aspects of the bill. The fact that it contains policy goes something like this, Mr. Chair. It's my goal that Minnesota will meet its clean energy goals before any other state in the country. The lower the cost of that renewable energy, the more we can buy. I was really heartened by some of the support from the GOP on the basic principle that we are for clean energy. That's a good thing for our state, for our nation, and for our planet. And what these changes in the bill represent are our best effort to make Minnesota a leader, even though we'll be a little bit behind California in taking some of the tough medicine. Mr. Chair, you are 100% correct that the original intent of the program is a victory for Minnesota, a victory for solar. And since we project a doubling of the electric demand in this state in the next 25 years, we're going to build a mountain of solar. And we're going to do it with local labor. We're going to do it with developers that we like and trust. And we're going to do it for the benefit of the people of Minnesota, not only meeting our clean energy goals, but doing it in a cost-effective way. And with that, Mr. Chair, ask for your support on the bill.
Okay, Senator Frentz moves that House File 2442 as amended be recommended pass and ask staff to make the technical and conforming changes in the legislation. Is there further discussion on the motion? Senator Frentz, should we do a roll call since there's so many people online?
Yes, request a roll call, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If there are no further discussion, staff will take the roll on House File 2442.
Senator Marty.
Aye.
Senator Frentz.
Aye.
Senator Pratt. Senator Champion.
Aye.
Senator Dames.
No.
Senator Draheim.
No.
Senator Howe.
No.
Senator Jasinski.
No.
Senator Mohammed.
Aye.
Senator Murphy. Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Senator Wickland.
Aye.
Senator Pratt.
No.
Senator Murphy.
By a vote of 6 ayes and 5 nays, the motion does prevail. Senator Frentz, thank you for this, and I think this may be our last Finance Committee meeting for the year. We don't know that, and we will let you know if we're going to have more.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Pappas.
the Capital Investment Committee just sent you 3 bills,
Oh, well, we
but they're vehicle bills. And so,
pensions too.
I think we're going to have a bonding bill. I'm hopeful. And so we'd have to hear it in finance.
I'm very hopeful of that as well, and pensions as well may be coming back. So we
Yes,
may be
pensions
back.
too.
We don't know when. We will see when the bills arrive and so on. We'll be in contact with Minority Lead and with others on the committee. With that, there being no further business, this meeting's adjourned.